What's up, Navigating Academia family? This is Dr. J. Phoenix Singh coming at you to answer not just one, but two valued viewers' questions, which were asked on a pretty similar topic. So I figure I'd tackle them both at the same time. Before I jump into it, though, please do take a second. It's totally free for you to be able to hit that like button. It helps the channel out so much, helps to be able to pay for my time, even though I don't get paid for the channel. But it's something that I really appreciate it always, to be able to see the likes. It helps me out a ton in terms of keeping the motivation going, to be able to keep the channel going. So here is the set of questions that I've got here today. One of them is from Eduardo, the other one's from Diego. So thanks so much to both of you guys for asking your questions. If you have a question after watching this video that you'd like me to answer, and it's high sensitivity, meaning that you think a lot of people from the Navigating Academia community could benefit from the answer, please do put it down in the comments below. Or if you just like the video, put that down in the comments below. I appreciate it. Always take a look at it, and that interaction with the video by leaving a comment helps me out a lot in terms of the YouTube algorithm, so it helps our little channel grow. In addition to that, if you're interested in one-on-one coaching with me to be able to help you get into your dream grad school, then you can go ahead and contact me via the website below, and you can book a paid session with me, and we can go from there. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to read both of the questions, and then I'm going to jump into my thoughts on it. I've taken some notes. You're going to see me looking down. That's just me looking at the screen to be able to make sure I can give you guys a comprehensive response. So first to Eduardo. Eduardo, you're the man. What's up? Here's the question. I'm an international student currently attending college in California. I'll be applying to PhD programs in clinical psychology in a couple of years. By any chance, would you be able to make a video where you give some insights for international applicants? What could be the difficulties or limitations for an international applicant? And what we should be prepared for? Okay, sorry, wording there is off. Second one is Diego. Diego says, I was wondering if you could talk about measuring one's reach in terms of grad programs. I'm from a very small country where the resources are, of course, not the same as in Europe or the US. How far can one go in terms of applying to grad school as an international student? I would love to apply to the big schools where the top dogs in the field are, but I'm afraid that I'd be wasting my time and money as I don't have a big name school on my CV. Okay, Diego, respect. Thank you so much for your question. So, to both Eduardo and Diego, guys, these are great questions. I can tell you, you guys know me, right? Both of my doctorates are from schools that are not in my native land, right? Which is the United States. So first doctorate's at Oxford, so that's in England. Second doctorate is in clinical psychology, it's from University of Constance in Germany. And so because of that, I completely respect and understand where you're coming from, guys, on this, okay? So here's the guidance that I would give you guys, okay, in no particular order. In terms of what people may not understand as an international applicant. I went through this myself. Yeah, I've obviously worked with a lot of people all across the globe and helped them get into grad school. And this is what I found overwhelmingly, okay? In terms of the, people call them pain points, the places where sometimes there's obstacles, guys, okay? So number one is, if you have a system, so I'm just going to use US context right now, okay? But it could be any context. Let's say, for example, you want to apply to Oxford, let's say, right? It would still be a similar set of problems. I'm going to use the US standards here, okay? So in the US, we have GPA. GPA is grade point average. Obviously, regardless of where you are, there's going to be some equivalent of GPA as an undergraduate, okay? Now, the problem is that even if you go to our neighbors to the north in Canada, for example, so I work with a lot of Canadian clients who are awesome people and great applicants, and I can tell you that sometimes that's really challenging for American supervisors to be able to see their system of grading and their system of GPA is totally different than the US. And because of that, I end up seeing numbers when I look at their transcripts, and I'm like, I have no idea what the hell this means. And obviously, this can be something where for a target supervisor who is looking, especially if they are a big name person, they're looking at so many applications. It is something where to make their life easy, you can do a pretty simple conversion, right, depending on what country you're in, and convert it to the GPA of whatever country the program is that you really want to get into, okay? So for example, if I was applying to McGill or, one of these great universities in Canada, I would do it the opposite way. I would take my US GPA, because that's where I did undergrad, and I would try to convert it over to the Canadian system. And I would take the answer to that, right, and either put it into my initial email to my target supervisor, right? And if you need to learn how to do that, we can either work together one-on-one, or it's something certainly where I have at least one other video on the channel this time that talks about, initial emails to target supervisors. Just search the channel, you'll find it. The other thing is, in your CV, in your resume, make sure that you put your GPA in that target country, right? That target program's country, in their format. You put that somewhere in your education section, okay? That's going to help out so much. Please, as a graduate supervisor, make our lives easy. Please. Honestly, we're looking at so many of these things, and we really want to get to know you. And if it's something where we're looking at it, the likelihood that we're going to do a bunch more work for your particular application is essentially zero, unless there's something else really compelling in your application. You got 20 publications or something like that, or there's a personal connection between me and your undergraduate supervisor or something like that, or I've met you in person before. Whatever it happens to be, right, that could overcome it. But in general, I'm not going to do that extra work, and nobody is. And so because of that, make sure that you do the conversion, okay? And so that's something that's number one, super important, and so easy to do, okay? Second one is oftentimes, I remember being in high school. My final year of high school, I spent some time in Germany, at a high school in Germany. And I still remember, so over there, they have this thing called the Abitur, right? And in the US, it's not really the equivalent, but same kind of idea as a standardized test is like the SAT or the ACT here in the US, right? So what happens is that if I go to another country and I say, oh, my ACT score was whatever, or my GRE score was whatever, my MCAT score was whatever, my, MAT score was whatever, okay? GMAT, whatever. GMAT, MCAT, LSAT. These are all things that if you're not in the US, you probably have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. And you can imagine that if you're in the US and you're applying to a school in another country, they probably don't know what the hell you're talking about in terms of the scores and what they mean. It's always good to have data like percentiles, for example, because that's a lot more meaningful. It's much more of a universal statistical language than is something like, my GRE score was such and such. Plus, these tests change over time. Since when I was in grad school, since when I took the GRE, the whole test has changed completely. And my test scores no longer hold any water because the entire scoring system is different, right? So these things can change over time, and they can certainly vary between countries. So make sure that if you took a test in another country, in your home country or wherever you did undergrad, and now you want to apply to another country, usually you're going to have to take that test as well. So for example, if you want to get into a school in the US, a lot of them take one of these tests, like the GMAT, the MCAT, the LSAT, the GRE. You're going to have to take those anyway, but if it's something where your programs do not require those, but you took a similar test in your home country, don't assume that we're going to have any idea what your scores mean. If you can give us percentiles, that will help a ton, okay? That's number two. Number three. Internationally, degrees mean different things. For example, an MD in the US is a medical doctorate, and technically speaking, that terminology, medical doctorate, means the same thing in the UK. But an MD in the UK is completely different than what it is in the US. All right, so over in the UK, for example, they've got something called BSc Med. If you want to be the equivalent of what you and I would consider a medical doctor in the US, you start with a BSc Med, right? And it's a dedicated kind of undergraduate medical degree. That's what you do. And the overwhelming preponderance, if not 100% of all the coursework that you do is all focused on being a medical doctor. That's what it is, right? Now, if you go and do an MD, right, what ends up happening is that it looks very different in terms of its length, its structure, its output than in the US, completely different, but it's the same letters, okay? Now, think about other things. Like, for example, my clinical psych degree is literally, it's not like a DClin Psych, which is what we refer to as in the UK. It's not like a PsyD, like some programs are in the US. It's much more akin to a clinical psychology PhD in the US, right? But again, the letters are different. Same thing at Oxford, right? I always talk about having a PhD in psychiatry, and people are like, what the heck are you talking about? You can't have a PhD in psychiatry. Well, I have a DPhil in psychiatry. It was a doctorate in philosophy. It's a PhD, right, in psychiatry. It's a research degree from Oxford, right? Totally normal. Anybody can Google it. This has confused more people than you can shake a stick at. People get very confused when I talk about my educational background because they hear psychiatry, they think I must have gone to medical school. I didn't go to medical school. I have a medical sciences degree in psychiatry and psychiatric research, and it's a PhD in psychiatry, right? But again, changing countries can really confuse people. So if you have a degree in something and it means something different, in your country than in the host country that you would like to go to, which hosts the program that you're interested in applying for. Just keep that in mind. You can talk about this in the personal statement. You can talk about this in so many different places, on your CV, like you name it. But make sure that your target program understands your educational pedigree. A lot of people don't even think about these things. Super important, okay? Fourth, but certainly not. And finally, but not least important. Oh, let's put it this way. A lot of people are not going to be familiar with the big name players, right, in other countries. So, for example, in any country in Western Europe, if you were to ask me what the major forensic psychology universities are, I could probably name you the top 2 or 3 programs per country, because there's not a ton of them, all right? And in each of those, there's usually 1 or 2 big name players. But a big name player in the US and a big name player in some of these other countries, sometimes when I say that it's kind of a false equivalence, what I mean is that, a big name player in the US may have 150 to 500 publications. A heavy hitter in a country where maybe they're, like, for example, in Spain. I have amazing colleagues in Spain, and most of their work they publish in Spanish. Every now and again, they have work in English, but for the most part, it's in Spanish. And most of those articles are not read by individuals who don't speak Spanish. They don't take the time to translate them, etc. Even if the work is phenomenal, all right? So there's certain colleagues I have in Spain who do not really have a presence on the international scene, but they're really phenomenal at what they do, and their work in Spanish is incredible because I've taken the time to translate some of it, read it, and then get in contact with those individuals. So most folks, though, aren't going to do that. Now, I happen to have an international bent. That's kind of like my reputation in my little baby niche of a field, is that I'm one of the guys who does a lot of international work, international surveys. I do a lot of speaking and training internationally. That's just my thing. I enjoy it. Everybody's got their thing. Everybody's got something different, okay? And remember, fields are tiny and large at the same time, and certainly within countries where maybe your field, it's not that it's further behind, it's that there's not as many programs, right? And it's maybe not been around as long. In those types of countries, usually what you're going to end up finding is that the field is much tinier, and there may be this perception in your head that everybody in the world must know about this particular person or this particular program. Don't make that assumption. It's really important. So don't assume that if you go into a university in a different country and you talk about, like my supervisor was such and such, and you say it in a way it's like, of course everybody's going to know, the likelihood is very low that they're going to know. All right. And so that's just something to kind of be aware of. And it can be frustrating because it's just like, yeah, but in my country, there's such a big deal. I get it. I honestly do. I understand. But that's something to just be aware of. So those are kind of the 4 big stumbling blocks, I would say. The one thing for Diego, in terms of Diego saying basically like how far can your reach go? It can go anywhere. It really can. Just remember that there's certain languages in terms of credentials that everybody understands and respects. So having publications in a peer-reviewed journal, especially if the peer-reviewed journal has a respectable impact factor, and depending on the country that you're applying to the program in, like for example, if you're applying to a US program, but all of your work has been published in Romanian, right, then that would be a challenge, right? Or if most of your work is in Czech, right, and you don't want to apply to a school in Czech Republic, that could be a challenge. But so long as the journal still has an impact factor, even if the impact factor is not overly high, it's still an impact factored peer-reviewed journal. If it's indexed in something like Scopus, even better, right? So that's what I'm talking about here. There are certain things like publication count, impact factor, H-index. These are things that are universal. It doesn't matter what country you're from or what country you want to go and visit, all right? That basically makes you discoverable in those other nations as well. So focus on building up those types of credentials. So for example, like if I'm in the UK and there's I'm a forensic guy, right? So the forensic risk assessment tool like the OGRS, Offender Group Reconviction Scale, okay? OGRS is not used in a lot of other countries, if any other country. It's a very British specific thing. And so because of that, if you go to the US and you say, well, I've got my certification in the OGRS, we don't care at all. It wouldn't mean anything to us. It's not useful. I'm not going to be impressed that you did it. So that's something where you just need to be aware of whether or not your credentials, your background, etc., is it something that is as impressive as somebody from that other country, right? That's the big thing. Very rarely, if ever, is it going to be something that will put you over the top. If you have two individuals who are equally credentialed in every conceivable way, is it something where being an international student is going to put you over the top? No, I can't imagine that happening, right? For any number of reasons, right? Now, do I think that there's going to be favoritism if somebody else is from your country and like that's the only reason why? Well, that's kind of xenophobia. So no, I don't think that that's necessarily true. It's certainly something, obviously, where if everything is kind of equal, sometimes there are certain things like quotas and this kind of stuff. It depends on the school. It depends on the country that you're dealing with, right? Then it's something where it could actually be a disadvantage, right? In other countries, though, it could be an advantage because they really want to boost up, diversity. But the whole diversity thing is much more of an undergraduate-focused thing in terms of it being beneficial relative to grad school. That's just what I find in general. So, okay. Guys, love you to death. Eduardo and Diego, thank you so much, guys, for your questions and for your very kind words, even though I didn't read them as part of your comments. Both of you guys were very, very generous, so I really appreciate you. All right, folks, be sure to smash that like button. If you are an international student like I was, remember that you can do this. You really can. There are a lot more challenges, I would argue, than there would be for individuals who are trying to go, like if I did go and get the doctorate in the U.S., even though I got accepted to U.S. programs, I decided to go abroad. It was a great decision for me, but I'm sure that I would have been just fine if I went within my own country as well. Again, focus on those universal language credentials like publications and all, you're going to be fine. All right, guys, have a great day. Peace.